Hi everyone, welcome to Raw Inspired Living. My name is Kelly and I'm so grateful that you found us and that you are here. Today I want to talk about a specific kind of exhaustion that hits in the afternoon. And if you've experienced it, you know exactly what I mean. It's not really just feeling a bit tired, it's a heaviness that comes on fast. Somewhere between 2 and 4 in the afternoon where your energy just drops out from under you. Your thinking slows, your motivation might disappear, and you could feel a very strong pull towards sugar or caffeine. Some women actually describe it as almost needing to lie down. And then sometimes an hour or so later, you get a second wind and suddenly you are wired at 9 or 10 at night when really you should be winding down. If that pattern sounds familiar, I want you to keep watching because what I'm going to explain today will probably be the first time anyone has given you an accurate description of what is actually happening in your midlife body when that crash occurs. And more importantly, why it gets so much worse in midlife. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelly and I am from Raw Inspired Living, and this is the fourth and final video in my blood sugar series for midlife women. If you haven't watched the first 3 videos, I will link them below. Each one builds on the last and together they give you a complete picture of what is actually happening in midlife metabolism around blood sugar. But this video does stand alone because this crash is specific, it's predictable, and it is sometimes a very debilitating afternoon energy drop. It's something so many women are experiencing and almost no one is explaining properly. So let's change that. I want to start by being honest about my own experience with this because for a long time I thought that the afternoon crash just happened when you were busy and stressed and not sleeping well enough. I thought that it was a lifestyle problem. I would hit that 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock wall and think, I just need to push through. Or I would reach for something sweet and tell myself I would go to bed earlier tonight. And some days I really would have to give in to the sugar cravings and I would go for chocolate or a biscuit or whatever was sweet in the kitchen. I really felt like I needed something sweet every afternoon around that time. I would feel better for about 20 minutes and then I would feel worse. I really didn't understand what I was experiencing, and I didn't understand that it wasn't a willpower problem or a tiredness problem, it was a blood sugar event, a predictable physiological response to a cascade that had been building for hours before I ever felt it. And once I understood that, once I could see the whole sequence, it stopped feeling like something that was just happening to me and started feeling like something I could actually do something about. So let me explain what the crash actually is. When you eat a meal, your blood sugar rises. Insulin is released to move that glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells where it becomes energy. In a metabolically stable system, that process is smooth and the blood sugar curve is gentle. It rises steadily, it falls gradually, it's all beautiful. But in midlife, with declining estrogen, reducing that insulin sensitivity, that curve can become a little more erratic. Glucose takes longer to clear, which means the insulin response can overshoot. And when insulin overshoots, blood sugar drops below the stable range. That drop is the crash. It's not imagined, it's not a weakness, it is a measurable physiological event. Blood glucose falling faster or lower than your body can comfortably manage. That's really what it is. And your body's response to that drop is to raise cortisol. Cortisol's job in this moment is to release stored glucose back into the bloodstream to stabilize the blood sugar. But the experience of cortisol rising mid-afternoon is, depending on how sensitive your system is, brain fog, heaviness, irritability, a strong craving for sugar, and in some women, a kind of anxious, flat feeling that is very hard to describe, but instantly recognizable once you've felt it. Now, here is the part that most women never connect. That crash did not start at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Or it started, we think that, oh my gosh, that's the problem, but it's actually not the problem, right? It actually started at breakfast, or it started with the gap between breakfast and lunch, or it started with what lunch actually contained. The crash in the afternoon is almost always the end result of a blood sugar pattern that has been building across the whole day. Let me walk you through it and in sequence because this is where it becomes really practical. If breakfast was low in protein, for example, a piece of toast or a whole fruit smoothie, overnight oats without a protein anchor, blood sugar rose quickly and then came down faster than it should. Your body managed it, cortisol helped stabilize, but the system used up some of its buffer. Then if there was a long gap between breakfast and lunch, maybe 5 hours, cortisol had to work again to keep blood sugar stable across that gap. By the time lunch arrived, blood sugar was already in a low range, and you may have been hungrier than you expected, which often means you ate more quickly or more carbohydrate heavy than you intended. And then after lunch, especially if lunch was a larger carbohydrate load without sufficient protein, there was another blood sugar spike and a corresponding drop. And that drop, coming after a morning of already stretched blood sugar management, hits much harder than it would have if the morning had been stable. The 2 or 3 o'clock crash is very rarely about what you ate at lunch. It is about the entire blood sugar story of the day up to that point. And in midlife, that story becomes more consequential because with reduced estrogen, reduced insulin sensitivity, and a more reactive cortisol response, the swings are wider and the drops are lower, and the recovery is slower. There is also something that makes the crash worse in midlife specifically. And I want to spend a moment on this because I don't hear it talked about enough. As estrogen declines, your adrenal glands take on more of the work of producing certain hormones. Your adrenals are already producing cortisol in response to daily stress, physical, emotional, and physiological. So by mid-afternoon, if you have had a demanding morning and a stressful meeting and a hard workout, a difficult conversation, your cortisol has already been working hard. And a blood sugar drop on top of an already stressed adrenal and cortisol system creates a much deeper crash than a blood sugar drop in isolation would. This is why the crash in midlife feels different to the tiredness you remember from your 30s. It is not just that you are more tired now, it is that the physiological domino effect of blood sugar instability landing on an already cortisol burdened system creates a level of depletion that feels disproportionate to what actually happened. And this is the piece that connects to sleep because cortisol rose to compensate for that afternoon drop. It has to actually come back down. And in some women, instead of cortisol declining smoothly through the evening and reaching its lowest point in the earliest hours of the morning, as it should, it rebounds. The system overshoots in the other direction. You get a second wind. You feel wired at 9 or 10 at night when your body should be moving towards sleep. You cannot settle. And then, because cortisol stays elevated too long, you either can't fall asleep easily or you fall asleep and then wake up somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning when blood sugar drops again and cortisol rises again to manage it. The afternoon crash and the 3 a.m. waking are connected. They are part of the same blood sugar and cortisol pattern playing out across the entire day and into the night. I covered the 3 a.m. waking in detail in video 1 of this series, so I will link those, as I said, for you. So if you want to go deeper, it's there for you. But I want you to see the whole picture because it often looks like a separate problem or separate problems when it is actually one continuous pattern. So what do you actually do about this? Because I don't want to spend this whole video explaining the physiology without giving you something genuinely practical to work with. The most important thing I can tell you is this. You address the afternoon crash by working backwards. You don't fix it at 2 or 3 o'clock, you fix it at 7 in the morning. You start your day with a good breakfast that has a genuine protein anchor. It is the single most impactful thing you can do for your afternoon energy. And this really helped me understand the whole cycle because often I would fast in the morning and I would be so starving later. It wasn't a great cycle for my midlife body. So you want 25 to 35 grams of protein at your first meal, not just a little token amount, but a real protein anchor. We really need to focus on resetting this metabolic structure at this stage, right? So this will change the entire blood sugar trajectory of the day. It sets a stable foundation that the rest of the day builds on. If you are plant-based, this requires some intention. So think tofu scramble, a smoothie with a full serve of good plant protein powder, and something to slow it down. The tempeh with a grain-based, legumes, not fruit with a sprinkle of seeds. A real protein anchor. The second piece is eliminating the long gap. Eating every 3 to 4 hours while you're awake keeps your blood sugar in a stable band throughout the day and removes the cortisol spikes that happen when the system has to compensate for an extended fast. This is not snacking. This is intentional, structured fuel windows. Protein needs to also be anchored with moderate carbohydrates and measured fat every time, right? So it's protein first, it's got measured carbohydrates and measured fat. That's how each meal of the day should look. The third piece is looking at what lunch actually contains. If lunch is the meal that most directly precedes the crash, it really does deserve a bit of attention. A lunch that is high in carbohydrates without sufficient protein is almost always going to produce some degree of a post-lunch blood sugar rise and fall. Not because carbohydrates are bad, they aren't, but because in midlife, your body has a reduced insulin sensitivity. So unanchored carbohydrates move through the system faster and produce more instability. So you pair every carbohydrate with protein. Keep the portions measured and consistent. So about half to 3/4 cup of carbohydrate with your meals. Generally consider what time you eat lunch. If there is a long gap between your lunch and your next meal, or your breakfast and your lunch, a small protein containing snack in the late afternoon may be useful. It's more useful than trying to push through. And the fourth piece, which women often underestimate, is what you drink. Caffeine consumed after midday, particularly in the 2 to 3 hours before the crash typically hits, can mask the early signs of blood sugar dropping and then contribute to the cortisol load that makes the crash worse when it does arrive. And I'm not saying to eliminate coffee. If you love coffee, that's fine, but I am saying pay attention to the timing and notice whether caffeine is helping you manage the crash or whether it is actually part of the pattern that deepens it. And just while we're on caffeine, try not to have coffee in the morning on an empty stomach, because that is going to contribute to that later crash as well. So here is what I want you to take away from this video and from this whole series. The blood sugar symptoms that show up in midlife, the fatigue, the hunger that doesn't make sense in the afternoon, the afternoon crash, the 3 a.m. waking, the belly fat that won't shift despite eating well, these are not separate problems. They are a connected pattern. And that pattern has a consistent root cause, which is blood sugar instability in a hormonal environment that is no longer providing the same metabolic scaffolding that it once did. I hope that understanding that is genuinely useful for you, because once I saw the pattern, I knew that I could intervene at any of those points, and you can intervene at the right point. You are not guessing anymore. You are not blaming yourself anymore. You are responding intelligently to what your body is actually communicating. That is what this series has been about. It's honestly was so interesting to me, and so I felt such relief because I could finally understand what was happening. And I didn't really ever think about blood sugar before because I wasn't diabetic and my blood sugar was always normal, right? But in midlife, it really is very important. So if you want to go deeper and understand exactly where your metabolism is right now, I have a free guide. It's called Understanding Your Midlife Metabolism, and it includes a self-assessment that really will help you identify which patterns are active in your body right now. And it gives you a little guide of where to start. I'll pop it in the description below. If this video has helped you in any way, please share it with other women you know that are in this stage of life, because I really believe that they will benefit from hearing this information as well. And again, I hope this video has helped you in some way, and I look forward to seeing you again in Raw Inspired Living.